Hello, everybody. My name's Ethan Hawke, and I'll be leading this conversation with our filmmakers here, who I think need no introduction. Hello, hello. Wow, what a pleasure to be here with you both. This film is just absolutely phenomenal. It's so elegant. It's so beautifully made. I was just blown away by it. And why don't we start? Will you tell me how did this come to be? How did we come to be sitting here tonight?
Well, we got really lucky that Apple Corps reached out to us. Well, let me start actually a little earlier. 13 years ago, Marty directed, I edited a film called George Harrison Living the Material World.
It's incredible.
And
Yeah,
thank
it's an
you.
amazing film.
Olivia Harrison became a very good friend of ours, and we became immersed in George's world, in the Beatles world. We interviewed Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, and we got to know the folks at Apple Corps. And they had this treasure trove of footage, and they reached out to us and asked us. I assumed in part it's because we're from New York and we're very New York centric, and this is a very New York
Or
story.
Manhattan.
I live in Brooklyn.
It's all right.
And if we'd be interested in working on something, and we were.
It's the Maisel brothers. How did the film is so beautiful to look at? Obviously, the '64 photography is incredible, and the way you've shot the interviews and the interviews you found, the way that they integrate with the footage that you have is just it's really stunning. But tell me about going through the Maisel brothers footage. Well,
Well, how much was that, David?
There was only 11 hours.
Only, okay. Because normally we get like 300 hours.
And they didn't shoot for that many days. I mean, I think they shot 4 days in New York, 1 day in Washington, 1 day in Miami, which, generally, yeah, on this style of documentary, it's hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours.
And to think about it, though, Ethan, I think about what Al and Dave used to do, along with Penny Baker and Leacock, coming out of the French and Italian New Wave period. There was something called direct cinema, right? And you could see it. I got to work with them a little bit in the late 60s. They switched to color. And in their 60s, using the Eclair camera. And, it was just a crew of two of them. It was Al on camera and Dave on the microphone and with his Nagra recorder. And my job was to hold a light for Al because they need a little more light with the color. And that's when I picked up and watched what he was doing, because what they don't direct, but in effect they do. Because you could see Al, I had to anticipate where he was going to move. Where he moved with wanting you to see a certain place in a certain way is in effect directing the film as he's shooting. But they never got in the way of the people in front of the lens. They disappeared. And this was an extraordinary. You could see they let it all happen. They let everybody behave in a way, and they pick up on that. But he was picking up little bits of information, going along the chairs, coming around this way, going to the people there. You could see him. I could watch him, and I had to anticipate what he was doing. So you could see it in this too.
there's my favorite moment of this film is is the very end of it, is the final moment, and because there is something about watching this, and I find this is kind of my takeaway on No Direction Home as well, that a generation creates the artist, and the artist is receiving the generation, and they're working with each other. And that thing that Lennon says, I think it's really wonderfully humble, and I think it's also true that he's sitting up there on the crow's nest, observing this moment where the definition of masculinity is changing, the definition of what rock and roll is changing. There's this wave that they're a part of, and this film is that. It's like the tip of the boat. I mean, it's just the wave is just beginning.
Yeah, it's just the very beginning. There's
I mean,
just hints
even
of it.
those opening images of when they're hearing their own voice,
was with
It's
that.
so touching because it's almost. I remember. Do you remember when they had answering machines and you'd hear I'd be at a friend's house and you'd hear yourself leave a message and you'd be like, "Ah, it's
Weird. I
disgusting."
don't like that. Yeah.
Such a weird. And now the kids today, they grow up with themselves on Insta. They're
Yeah.
so used to it. But it was such a. They're getting used to seeing themselves in the third person, which is changing our psychology. And this was just happening.
Yeah. Where was that from, David? That last bit on John Lennon. You chose that whole section.
Yeah, it was shot for French television. And I mean, that's the thing with Bob Dylan or the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. People sometimes, the Beatles caused the '60s, or they caused. People will say these things. And I thought John expressed it very eloquently that, as you said, there's some kind of relationship between the artist and change, but it's not so black and white.
Yeah. And there's a thing, I think it's somebody in the movie says this thing about it's not just the music, it's the feeling behind the music.
Sananda Maitreya.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like Ralph Waldo Emerson or something. Emerson used to say that it's not that the poem doesn't matter. It's the energy, it's the blood, the sweat that made the poem happen. And it's arresting to see their energy. Even the room here burst into applause when what was it? Was it just Twist and Shout or something? Was one? Which one was it?
Tell Sally.
Yeah, and it was just incredible. It's just incredible. You're like, wait, I've heard the song 1,000 times, but you're watching it and it's actually breathtaking. I was so surprised. I watched the film the first time last night, and my kids, like, I'll be editing something. They get so bored so quickly. I sometimes watch rough cuts with my kids just to watch the first time they look at their phone, because that always tells me I'll say, all right. Well, at 11 minutes they looked at their phone, so we got to figure out what's going on at the 8-minute mark that is wrong. And my 16-year-old just got hip. She sat down and she watched this whole movie start to finish, and I was impressed that the music is still working. The music still has a power. And I don't know, like when I was a kid or somebody would play Glenn Miller or something for me that was before I wasn't hypnotized. It took me a long time to understand what was great about that music. But this music is still this.
Yeah, it's still immediate and still accessible. It still has the effect. It still has the impact.
It still has the impact. And I thought that woman who said, I'd never heard anybody say that before about, there's the guy who's, I don't know, he's a security guard or whatever. He's saying that these girls are sex addicted or whatever. They're making this, he's kind of making this. And then that woman talks about the idea of a man who is proud of being a man and proud of being gentle. And that they're actually inviting these women in a way that they've never been invited in.
The key.
That they're not that even Elvis it was all about some kind of domination. I'm asserting myself on you. And they're such gentle, they're so kind, and they love each other.
No.
And
funny.
And they're funny.
The funny goes directly, it goes directly into you. It erases a lot of barriers.
And I think it's that humor's inside the music. Mm-hmm. You feel their friendship in the music, and it's why, even though when Smokey Robinson does yesterday, it's a staggering musical accomplishment. It blows you away. They don't have that, but they do have this other thing, which is friendship. Did you feel? Was it interesting getting to know them?
Oh yeah, I mean.
I would think, yeah.
I mean, I was jealous. I was like sitting there talking. Just hearing Ringo talk about his drum kit. It's what's it like to be in the room?
We had a very quick turnaround for us. So the edit room was open 12 months. Now, that's a long schedule for some people, but for us, that's a short schedule. I regretted that it was so short. I would look forward to working on it every day. I could spend another 2 years just in Beatles 64.
Well, we did. How long did it take to do George Harrison's? And
quite honestly, it was 3 years.
3 years.
But it was in 2 parts, and it was almost 4 hours.
Almost 4 hours. Yeah.
Well, what's nice about this film is there's a discipline to it. It's just this one. The fact that you only had 11 hours of film to comb through gives it it's immediate. It's this one moment in time. It made me so nostalgic. The photography of the city, seeing the city like
New
that.
York in that time. And this was the break beginning of the whole change. 64, right in 64, everything changed. Right as soon as they came to New York.
Say
all
more about
changed.
that.
Well, the point, men started to grow their hair long because only women had long hair. So, I mean, you go into my old neighborhood in Lower East Side and you had long hair, you get hit. I mean, that's what it was.
It doesn't even look that long to me.
I know.
I-
It
I'm
looks
a-
like yours is longer right now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they're talking about their funny haircuts, and you're like, they are funny, but not for the way that
Well,
they
it was really Ethan. It was really something. I mean, I'll never forget the newspapers about 4 days before they arrived. Yeah, the attitude was, let's see what these kids. What is this nonsense? And look at them. They look like look, when somebody need a haircut, and it was complete ridicule. And then suddenly, one morning I was going to my class. I had a class I was at Washington Square College, NYU, and I was living on Elizabeth Street, which was the old Italian neighborhood at that time. And it was around 10:30 in the morning, and I had to get to a class. And I've just walked down Houston Street to the west side, and that was the school, And so I was getting ready, and it was Cousin Brucey on the radio, and said, "Okay, now I'm going to play. You've been hearing all about these Beatles. Now I'm going to play for the first time in New York. It could have been the world. It could have been all America, but it was the first time in New York. I know for sure." He said, and this is a song, it's called I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I stopped and listened, and I was late for the class, because this is good. Because there was no tradition, really, of British or English pop stars that translated to America prior to that. You had big band stuff where there was a group called, an orchestra called Ambrose in the 40s that was more like Benny Goodman or Tommy Dorsey. That was the British version. They're pretty good. And that was it. I mean, there were a few pop stars who, but they did not translate here. It just didn't work. But suddenly this, not only did it have roots in whether it was Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and Little Richard, it had something else to it. And that something else is what you're describing. There was a joy and suddenly a feeling of elation listening to it that you loved them. I knew that they liked each other. They loved each other. And this was coming through the music. And this changed everything. That was the first song we heard.
And one of the things that I find a little heartbreaking is have you noticed in recent music, there's so few bands. It's an individual, a remarkable individual. There's a great decrease. I saw some article about the top 40 music, about how many of them are bands versus individuals. And I'm watching Paul McCartney, one of the great musical geniuses of his generation, singing backup.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Then John Lennon singing backup.
Backup.
And then Lennon and McCartney singing backup for George.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. I mean, as much as I love today's artists, I'm not sure a lot of these big stars now ever sang backup in anybody's band. And I think that it's part of the power of it. There is a humility and a humor, as you say, and I do think that's what we're relating to, and it makes me want to ask you guys about, as time goes on, this was a major renaissance in music. I mean, I'm fascinated that the music isn't aging, the ways that often music ages, and that it's getting obvious that the 60s into the early 70s, even lesser bands were
right.
staggering.
I know, yeah.
And as time goes by, we're seeing that like a movement in painting or a movement. There was something amazing happen in the world with music.
Even in cinema and movies, it was a situation where we became so like not complacent. We became annoyed that every week there was another masterpiece. We had to go to the art theater or the 8th Street Theater or the Waverly downtown or uptown somewhere and see another Bergman. Oh, my God.
Another one.
Another Truffaut, another Godard picture again. It's got to be good. I mean, what were we? I mean, that's terrible to think. But that was that period of 59 to Close to 70, 68, 70. And by then, of course, by then the music had soared. You know, everybody. It was extraordinary.
But I think they'll look back and say that they were masterpieces. It was not
They
an
really-
overused word. They were actually
really were.
happening, like periods in a museum. You know, where there are moments, and that's why I feel like we are as good as our generation, and that's why I feel like the last line of the movie is so important.
Right.
About, you know, if audiences don't go see masterpieces, they won't happen.
That's right.
You know, and if we don't talk about them and
That's
we
right.
don't celebrate them and we don't honor them, not just the ones that are making money, but the ones we're required to notice it. My mother she had tickets to see the Beatles in Fort Worth, Texas in the mid 60s. I don't know. And she has, with great shame, she gave her tickets away at the front door because she was so embarrassed about the way the other women were acting.
well,
She really wanted John and Paul to see her and be their friend. She didn't want to be one of the screaming fans. And she just realized when she got there, this is not going to happen. But, so she gave her tickets. I'm going to meet them someday, and I'll meet them as equals. And it didn't happen. But she's counting on me making a connection here to make that happen.
God.
Part of what was so surprising, though, and you talk about generational change, is I hadn't been so aware how there had been an establishment who didn't like the Beatles and worked very hard to prevent their success. You know, the reviews.
Hearing that review, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I remember though. It is amazing how people miss it. I was walking these streets the morning after Kurt Cobain played MTV Unplugged or something.
Unplugged, yes.
Yeah, and there was a terrible review. I was sitting at the diner reading this, and I just watched it, and they just made fun of their musicianship and thought it was lame and insipid and how he didn't have the vocals for this. And I remember walking around going, did they see the same show I just saw last night? This is an amazing event in my life. Totally missed, but I do think the great ones, they just ride over it. I mean, but I never knew that they were met with any resistance.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, what you see here, in the, you know, what he used in the film with David. I mean, absolutely. I mean, people were aghast, but quickly, like my parents are, you know, old Sicilian Americans and worked in the garment district. My mother loved them. My father was a little askance at first. Always suspicious, you know. But she would come with us to the H Street Playhouse, see Hard Day's Night. I mean, the places were packed with this sort of thing. But right around that time when Hard Day's Night came out, that's literally adults were then accepting and, you know, embracing the situation.
The thing that I find so remarkable about this film and seeing like 1964, that they were able to handle celebrity. You know, celebrity is a kind of toxic poison you drink that if you don't manage it right, it destroys the drive that made you want to do it. And the fact that those young men, and they're boys in this film. I mean, watching them
Just
crawl
20.
around the floor, but the fact that those guys made Sgt. Pepper's, those guys made Abbey Road.
4 years later, 5 years, yeah.
You're like, what? And
Yeah.
they survived it. That they didn't give in to thinking they were so important they didn't have to contribute. The fact that they could, to see all these adoration of them and then go write Eleanor Rigby. How do you do that?
I think it did help. You talked about how important it was that they were a band. I think it helped that there were four of them. I mean, George Harrison would often say, you know, Elvis or Michael Jackson, they were alone. They had this experience and it isolated them from everybody. But at least these four guys had each other who shared that experience.
And you feel it in them. They know each other's parents.
Yes, exactly.
You know, that's a big thing.
And the family,
when he
brothers,
says
right.
that thing, we played it for my dad.
Yeah,
You're
well,
like,
what?
yeah, it's so, remember, but I do think that it humanizes their fellow bandmates and therefore keeps you human. You understand you're not picked by God. You are a talented musician and you have a song to write tomorrow, you know? And I do think that's what carried them through. And sometimes it's so hard to see that moment of Lennon worrying about the Kennedy assassination and how violence can erupt, and that's a very how they in a way survived it, in a way did not survive it. The start of that energy is happening here. Um, should we open it up to any other questions? How do these kind of forums work?
You're in charge. Go
I'm in
ahead.
charge.
You're in
Yeah.
charge.
Go get
Well,
it, Ethan.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, obviously there was such a talented colorist on this movie. I was wondering how much work had to be done to the footage,
I'm so glad you asked that, because when we first sat down, I'm blown away about how well integrated the interviews are with the old footage and the different, even the interviews you chose seem to have a similar look to what you're shooting. And did you do that in post, or?
No, it's there's a lot of different steps. Let's first talk about the Maisels footage. It was restored by Peter Jackson's company, Park Road. And to my eye, when I started out, we were working in 16 millimeter, and of course, it got scratched the first day. You saw the dirt immediately. The work print always looked really crappy. This looks better than 16 millimeter looked when I was working in 16 millimeter. And Park Road is responsible for the restoration, how rich the blacks are, the level of the grain, how it looks like it was shot yesterday, even though it's black and white, and even though it's not a full screen aspect ratio. That's one thing. The second thing, we met with a bunch of DPs who had all these ideas about how you could shoot interviews and integrate it with the footage. And it was always it felt kind of gimmicky, like, oh, we'll make the face black and white, but your background will be in color and stuff like that. And it didn't seem like Beatle-like or Beatles 64, like we wanted to do something else. And I really wanted to shoot in the plaza, and I really wanted to shoot in Penn Station, and I really wanted to shoot at Kennedy Airport, all the interviews. And we did not have the budget for it. And then, well, but if we stick a picture of the plaza,
Yeah, it worked.
and then also somehow it marries the black and white footage with the interviews, but the interviews are still color, and it gives you an organic feel. So that was part of it. And then a guy named Joe Galler, who's just a tremendous colorist from the very beginning to the very end. He painstakingly color corrected
Because
it.
often, I've tried to make some documentaries, and it's really hard to create a visual aesthetic when you're using archival material.
Did the Newman
Yeah.
Woodward thing. It was
Yeah.
amazing, but it did work.
Well, but it's so difficult because a lot of the archival footage, it just doesn't cut, because the eye, it just doesn't work cinematically. And the interviews you found have a simplicity to the way that they're shot, or the way that you framed them, or the way you worked on them. Because I thought they were, I'm talking about the older archival ones of, the George Harrison out in his lawn has a similar aesthetic to the Lennon interview. And they match the way that you shot. It's so elegantly composed, and the way you use silences in the sound is really remarkable, because it makes you listen to the music. You let. There's a great Paul Newman line, which is, sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. And maybe.
It's true. It's true.
It's not his line. and I felt that you did that so beautifully in this.
I'd add two things. One is Ellen Kerr shot the interviews for the most part. Some of the interviews were shot, and I've learned more from Ellen than any other DP. She's tremendous, and so that's part of the reason it matches so well. Is she's an artist. She has a real feeling for it. And then there's an editor, Mariah Remit, who worked on the film. Really a wonderful editor, and Marty also often says on these projects, it's like composing music. Editing, in some way, there's a rhythm to it and a feeling for it, and you have to, and both she and I sort of came together. We had a feeling about all the interviews, and the truth is, John Lennon and George Harrison and Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, they did share something. Even all through the years of that archival footage, there's a common spirit in a way.
Yeah. Well, it shows. Do you?
Were there
working on this movie? And if so, what were they?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think it you have a real. I always think when I think about the Beatles, I always think about the later years, and it was so refreshing to be right at the beginning, and the level of they're so happy in February of 1964, and it's reflected in their behavior, and it's reflected in the music. The music is so imbued with joy. I don't know exactly if that's answering the question, but
Well, it is, and there's the amazing moment at the end when he says, "I get bitter too sometimes." And to see that John Lennon in relationship to the one that we've been watching throughout this documentary, you sense like, oh, a lot happened to you. A lot happened to you in the years between those.
And only in a few years, too.
Yeah, he's still a young man.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I want to say thank you to you both for making this film. I loved it so much. It's an honor to be with you. It's a beautiful film.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Ethan.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.